Are you a real
Nazi?
Well, technically, nah.
All right.
Do you know any Nazis? You probably do. If you aren't a Nazi yourself, then chances are you at least know one. Maybe they are a friend of yours, or perhaps a family member, and if it's not somebody in your personal life, it is highly likely you at least know of one or two digital Nazis. Here's the interesting thing. You might not agree with the Nazis' opinions on everything, but if you've ever supported them, or defended their right to voice opinions, well, that makes you a Nazi too. You see, a Nazi is defined as anyone I disagree with politically and anyone who tangentially supports those who voice such beliefs. I know this because I am a true liberal. And as a true liberal, I know that the only way to defeat these Nazis and their disgusting opinions is to not listen to what they're actually saying. Block your ears, shut your eyes, shake your head, and scream loudly. After you've done this, ensuring to continue your ignorance of their arguments, you have to call them racist and maybe throw in sexist or fascist, just for good measure. The final step to defeating a Nazi is to attempt to harm them, either financially or, if you can get close enough, physically. In this day and age, telling a simple joke, holding an opinion that differs from the mainstream left, or even discouraging and disavowing violence can get you labelled by some as a Nazi, a fascist, or even a white supremacist, or at least a sympathiser. How did we get here? Well, those terms are just the latest in a long line of words stripped of their former weight and thrown around as ways to curtail arguments and devalue or dismiss opinions. The proud tradition stretches back decades, with words such as sexist or racist becoming so hollow as to be practically useless as descriptors. After all, how can I be sure that the person just called racist really is racist? These days, that accusation could simply be because they had the audacity to wear their hair in a particular style. Likewise, that person called sexist? It could be because he just turned the air conditioning up a notch. It sounds ridiculous, but these are actual cases where race and gender politics have come into play. And now, after January 20th, with the inauguration of Donald Trump, the likes of Nazi, fascist, and white supremacist have joined those same ranks. What once were terms used to describe specific ideologies and political positions have become labels suitable for the smallest of misdemeanors. Some words such as cuck, SJW, regressive, or fucking commie scum, those were always intended to be pejoratives, mocking and insulting. While they can be used seriously, at their core, they are anything but. They may get thrown around and used to derail conversations, but they were never intended to be terms used in a serious fashion. Unlike racist, sexist, Nazi, and the myriad of other words that fit into that category. It would be easy to talk about all these watered-down words for hours. There's so many of them. But for the sake of brevity, I really just want to talk about a couple. Nazi, fascist, and white supremacist. Nazi has, of course, been used as an often accurate descriptor for people for a long time. White supremacist, to a lesser extent. Fascist, well, not quite so much. Recently, however, they blew up in the mainstream. When Richard Spencer got punched during an off-the-cuff interview on the 20th of January, a debate exploded all over the internet. Is it okay to punch a Nazi? This was the question being asked by media and Twitter users alike. And for a while there, it seemed as if the resounding answer was yes. Yes, it is. And we should do it more often. It was as if people just didn't understand the implications of what they were saying, or the hypocrisy of it, for that matter. Shortly after a large portion of the internet vocally decided it was okay to punch people if they called them Nazis, it became the new hot word, and accusations of Nazism and fascism started popping up everywhere. It was like a game of whack-a-mole, but where the moles were YouTubers, comedians, or political commentators, or people who just dared to speak out on a controversial subject. As I said earlier, many people had already decided Nazis made for acceptable punching bags. So, were these new people being labelled as such also deserving of being beaten up? Or was physically attacking them not okay? In which case, what differentiates a punchable Nazi from a non punchable one? I haven't seen anyone give a solid answer to that one, so I tend to just stick with my initial reaction. Don't punch people, and don't call everyone and their dog a Nazi. The thing about devaluing a word in this way is that it doesn't really help them or their cause. Used inaccurately, a word loses its impact, and when that happens, people stop taking it seriously. They may start to jokingly refer to themselves as that. They will mock it, and they will mock the people using those words. Nowadays, when I hear someone referred to as a Nazi, it no longer makes me switch off and go, well, I don't really care what a Nazi thinks. No, now when I hear that, I find myself thinking, wow, I wonder what they said to get labelled as such. Maybe I'll look into it. And when I do, I'm not at all surprised if I find out that they are in no way a Nazi or a sympathizer. When people find out that sort of mislabeling is happening, those words become analogous in nature to the way racist and sexist are viewed in many circles. You can no longer rely on them being accurate descriptors. Of course, this wave of idiocy really kicked off with violence in the name of political ideologies. The irony of which is that the violence is being carried out by people in the name of defeating Nazis, and by extension, fascism. Fascism is, of course, defined as an authoritarian and nationalistic right-wing system of government and social organization, or extreme right-wing, authoritarian, or intolerant views or practices. Now, politically motivated violence based purely on another's ideology is, you guessed it, a rather authoritarian and intolerant practice. That's right, it's just a little bit fascist to go around beating up people you don't agree with. And if this whole thing is about stopping fascism, the best thing for these people to do may be looking in the mirror and stopping themselves. Another touch of hypocrisy came just recently at the Battle of Berkeley, where the practitioners of Punch a Nazi found themselves facing off against a group of people who were well and truly sick of their bullshit, and were prepared to do something about it. Obviously, a large-scale fight broke out, and people on both sides were injured, but there was one particular instance that stood out and gained widespread coverage. A woman, one Louise Roselma, was caught on camera as she was punched in the face by a man who we now know was one of the few white nationalists who was actually there. Sounds horrible, doesn't it? Someone goes to a protest and finds themselves in the middle of a chaotic battle and subsequently gets punched. Of course, there is much more to the story than that. Louise, after all, is hardly innocent. A member of Antifa, the largely communist and anarchist organization that should probably be labeled as terrorists, Louise went to the protest with no intention of being peaceful. She went there to fight, and in her own words, bring back 100 Nazi scalps. So, was there a large-scale movement of people saying, oh yeah, it's perfectly okay to punch a likely communist or anarchist, they're just as bad as Nazis? Of course there wasn't. She was lathered with sympathy, the punch condemned. I guess in the end we can't expect consistency from these sorts of people. We just have to go ahead and advocate against any politically motivated violence wherever we can. Try not to label people as undeserved extremes simply due to differences in opinion, and call out hypocrisy when and where it rears its head.